I was having coffee with a friend the other day, someone who is smart, successful, funny, objectively a catch. And I asked them how the dating life was going.
Oh,
And they didn't say good or bad. They just put their head in their hands and let out this long existential sigh.
I think we can all hear that sigh.
It wasn't sadness. It was just pure exhaustion.
That's the soundtrack of modern romance, isn't it?
Right. And the easy takeaway is to say, well, dating apps are trash, or, nobody wants to commit anymore. We see those headlines everywhere.
Oh, all the time.
But looking at this stack of research you've brought today, those hot takes feel, I don't know, incredibly lazy. They're looking at the symptoms, not the disease.
Completely. I mean, if you look at the sociological data, we aren't seeing the death of romance. We are seeing a complete rewriting of the operating system.
An operating system.
We're living through this massive tectonic shift from what sociologists call institutional intimacy to negotiated intimacy.
And the reason everyone's so tired is that we're stuck in the messy middle.
Exactly. The old rules are gone, but we haven't quite learned the new ones yet.
Institutional versus negotiated. That distinction feels like the anchor for this whole deep dive. So before we get into, why ghosting happens, let's define those terms. Because institutional intimacy sounds, well, it sounds a bit like a prison sentence.
Well, it wasn't a prison, but it's definitely a script. Think of institutional intimacy as the old model, the default setting for most of human history.
Okay.
In that world, your relationship roles were anchored to external things, political norms, religious rules, economic duty. You got married and stayed together because of fate or because you needed to merge family farms.
Or just because the village expected you to.
Right. The roles were prefabricated. You stepped into the role of husband or wife, and everyone knew exactly what those words meant.
So you didn't have to have a 4-hour conversation about what being a husband actually entailed.
Exactly. The script was written. You just had to act it out. Now, contrast that with negotiated intimacy.
Your new model.
In this new model, relationships are voluntary agreements. They are anchored in autonomy, equality, and psychological safety. You aren't together because the church or the state locks the door.
You're together because you actively agree to be every single day.
Every single day.
Which on paper sounds like utopia, freedom, choice.
But the catch, and this is what the sources really drill down on, is the workload.
The cognitive load.
It's immense. Because if there is no script, everything has to be discussed. Everything has to be negotiated.
Who does the dishes? Is monogamy the default? How do we handle money?
Whose career takes priority? In the old model, tradition answered those questions. In the new model, you have to answer them.
It's like moving from a house that came fully furnished to a house where you have to build every single piece of furniture yourself.
With an Allen wrench?
Every single day.
That is a perfect analogy, and that constant assembly is exhausting. So our mission today is to really unpack this shift. We're going to look at the history, the 3 macro shifts that kind of killed the old model. We're going to look at the relational mismatch it's created.
Basically why men and women seem to be talking past each other right now.
Yes. And finally, we're going to look at how some platforms, using a case study of a place called TBS, are trying to engineer a solution through, of all things, education.
All right, let's start with the history, because I think people forget how recent all of this is. The sources point to 3 specific drivers. Where do we begin?
We have to start with biology, or, well, the control of it. The source material points specifically to 1960.
The pill.
The approval of the first oral contraceptive, the pill. But we need to look beyond just the medical aspect here. We need to look at the psychological downstream effects.
Okay.
Before 1960, for women, fertility was largely a matter of fate. You got married, you had kids, that was the track. The pill moved fertility from fate to planning.
It fundamentally changed the timeline. Suddenly, you could plan a career, an education, a life, without this looming question mark of an unplanned pregnancy.
It turned life into a project you could manage. It decoupled sex from reproduction.
That's a foundational step for autonomy.
It is. But the second shift is just as critical, and interestingly, the source material cites a very recent date to highlight it. We're talking about exit accessibility.
This is the divorce conversation.
It is. The source specifically cites the introduction of no-fault divorce in England and Wales on April 6, 2022.
Wow, 2022. That recent.
Now, obviously, divorce existed before then. But that specific legal shift, removing the need to assign blame to prove someone was a villain, it's symbolic of a wider institutional permission structure.
It changes the default setting of the contract. It's the difference between a prison cell and, I don't know, a hotel room.
Right. The key takeaway here is if exit is practicable, if you can leave a marriage without destroying your life or your reputation, then staying together becomes a conscious choice.
A relationship is only legitimate if it's voluntary.
If you are trapped, it's not a relationship, it's an institution.
I love that idea that the open door is what gives the relationship meaning. You know, if the door is locked, you don't really know if the person wants to be there.
But if that door is wide open and they stay sat in the chair,
That means they're choosing you.
that's it, exactly.
Mhm.
Accessibility creates the condition for genuine choice. And then you add the third driver, secularization.
The decline of religious authority.
Right. And this doesn't mean people aren't spiritual. It just means that Scripture no longer defines the one correct way to partner for society at large. There isn't a priest or a rabbi standing over the relationship saying, this is how you must do it.
So you synthesize these three things. You control when you have kids.
The pill,
You can leave if you're unhappy.
divorce laws,
And there's no religious referee telling you the rule.
secularization.
Yeah.
And the result is that modern relationships are no longer inheritances of duty. They are contracts of meaning.
Contracts of meaning. That is such a beautiful phrase, but it also sounds incredibly high pressure.
How so?
Because meaning is slippery. It changes. If the relationship is based on meaning, what happens when the meaning wavers? Or when one person changes?
The contract risks becoming void. And this brings us right to the friction we're seeing today. Because while the structure of society has changed, our individual skills, and frankly, our expectations, haven't caught up.
This is the relational mismatch.
That's it.
This was the part of the research that really clicked for me. We have a situation where men and women, speaking very generally here, are bringing different currencies to the table, and the exchange rate is all messed up.
That's a great way to put it. The source material identifies a concept called provider evidence. Historically, this was the primary value signal for men.
This is the I can take care of you signal, the classic provider.
Yes, material stability, status, transactional competence. I have a good job, I have a car, I can fix the roof.
For generations, that was the deal.
It was the deal. The man provides safety and resources, the woman provides domestic and emotional labor. But because of those autonomy drivers we just discussed, that currency has been devalued.
The sources cite the UK gender pay gap here, 6.9% as of April 2025. Now, to be clear, that gap shows inequality still exists.
Of course.
But the argument isn't that women are out-earning men everywhere, it's that the gap no longer enforces dependency.
That is the crucial distinction. A woman today might earn slightly less on average, but she can still get her own mortgage. She can buy her own car.
So a man showing up to a date with just provider evidence, just his wallet and his job title, is offering something she can increasingly provide for herself.
It's like bringing water to a river. It's nice, but it's not scarce.
It's not a survival necessity anymore. So if I can pay the bills isn't the closer anymore, what's the new demand? What is the scarce resource?
Emotional competence. The sources are very, very clear on this.
Yep.
Women are increasingly demanding emotional safety, boundary literacy, and psychological insight alongside, or even instead of pure financial stability.
That feels like a massive pivot. We've gone from a hardware economy, can you build the house, to a software economy, can you understand my feelings?
It is. And it connects directly to the concept of the mental load. We usually talk about mental load in terms of chores. Who remembers to buy the milk?
Right, who schedules the dentist appointments?
But in this context, the research goes deeper. It talks about peacekeeping labor.
That term really stood out to me, peacekeeping labor. It implies a conflict zone.
In many ways, traditional relationships were exactly that for women. Peacekeeping labor is the work of managing a partner's emotions so they don't blow up. It's walking on eggshells. It's ego management.
It's anticipating his bad mood and fixing it before it happens.
Yes. The research suggests that because women have autonomy now because they can leave, their tolerance for that kind of labor has just plummeted.
So they aren't looking for a man to save them from poverty. They're looking for a partner who won't exhaust them emotionally. They want to retire from the job of peacekeeper.
Precisely. They want a relationship where they don't have to be the emotional manager. And this leads us to one of the most surprising and perhaps counterintuitive findings in the source material.
Which is?
This drive for autonomy is actually fueling the rise of ethically non-monogamous structures, or E&M.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the stereotype A&M or polyamory is usually about sex. It's about, I don't know, greed or novelty.
Or just wanting to sleep with more people.
Right. But you're saying there's a structural, safety-based reason for it?
Yes. And we need to pause here and be very clear. We are framing this sociologically, not morally. We aren't here to say monogamy is bad or E&M is good.
Right. We're analyzing why this shift is happening.
Exactly. And the numbers aren't insignificant. The source mentions studies of single Americans reporting that more than 1 in 5 have engaged in consensual non-monogamy at some point.
So this isn't just a tiny fringe group anymore.
It's becoming a statistically significant minority. But the fascinating part is why autonomy-oriented women are exploring it. The research suggests that for many women, E&M acts as an autonomy-preserving framework.
A rejection of ownership dynamics.
That's the phrase.
But how does that work in practice? Because to the average listener, managing multiple partners sounds like more mental load, not less. More calendars, more feelings.
More chaos. You would think so. But consider the default setting of monogamy. In a traditional script, there are a lot of silent assumptions.
You're mine, I'm yours, we do everything together.
You are responsible for my happiness. You don't have to talk about it, it's just assumed. It's the terms and conditions that nobody reads.
You just click accept when you say exclusive.
Exactly. But in E&M, nothing is default. Because you are breaking the script, everything must be negotiated. You have to explicitly agree on time, boundaries, health protocols.
Emotional needs.
Right. E&M acts as a forcing function for communication.
So for a woman who is tired of silent contracts where she ends up doing all the hidden emotional labor, E&M offers a framework of explicit consent.
Yes. It forces the cards onto the table. It's negotiated intimacy taken to its logical extreme.
That is fascinating. But it brings us back to the skill gap. Whether you're monogamous or not, this new world requires a level of communication most of us were never taught.
That's the mismatch. Again, if the old provider skills aren't enough, men and everyone really need a new toolkit. The source material actually lists specific skills.
Let's run through them, because I think these are useful takeaways regardless of your relationship status.
Absolutely. The first is boundary literacy.
Which sounds academic, but I take that as hearing the word no without it being a personal attack.
Correct. It's hearing no without rupture, without punishment. It's understanding that a boundary isn't a rejection of you, it's a definition of the other person's space.
Okay, what's the second one?
Arousal regulation.
Now, listeners might hear that and think sexual arousal, but we're talking about the nervous system, right?
We are. It's emotional arousal. It's the ability to manage your own jealousy, your own feelings of rejection, your own anger.
The ability to self-soothe.
Instead of lashing out at your partner to fix it for you.
That ties directly back to reducing that peacekeeping labor. If I can regulate myself, my partner doesn't have to keep the peace.
Exactly. It removes the burden of your emotions from their shoulders. Then you have repair skill, the ability to apologize effectively, and finally, non-possessive partnership.
Supporting a partner's expansion rather than requiring their reduction. That was the quote from the source.
That's the key phrase. The partnership should be a platform for both individuals to grow bigger.
Okay, so we've established the problem. The old rules are gone, and the new rules require PhD-level emotional skills. But where are we supposed to learn this? You don't learn arousal regulation in high school.
No, you don't. And usually the answer is just trial and error, which is painful.
Or we turn to dating apps. But the source material is pretty harsh on mainstream apps.
It is. It argues that mainstream apps optimize for match velocity. They want you swiping, matching, and chatting as fast as possible. The source calls this environment cognitively corrosive.
Cognitively corrosive? That is such a visceral description. It sounds like acid for your brain.
It is. It treats people like products on a shelf. It's fast, cheap, and low context.
But the source does highlight an interesting case study, a platform called TBS that's trying to do something different. They're approaching this as a problem of platform governance.
Right. TBS is treated as an outlier here because their core philosophy is education before access.
Wait, so you have to go to school before you can date? That sounds intense.
In a sense, yes. The platform uses what we call readiness scaffolding. Users have to complete coaching modules before they get full messaging privileges.
That is a massive amount of friction. In the tech world, friction is the enemy.
Correct. But here, friction is a feature, not a bug. They call it friction for harm. By gating access behind education, you raise the cost of entry. You filter out the people who are just looking for a quick dopamine hit.
You select for intent.
You do.
It's a filter. If you aren't willing to watch a video on consent, you're probably not the right match for someone looking for this high-level negotiated intimacy.
It's like a bouncer at the club, but instead of checking your shoes, he's checking your emotional IQ.
Exactly.
And it goes further. They use badges and levels to reward relational competence. So instead of just being rewarded for being attractive, you're rewarded for being good at communicating.
It gamifies being a better partner. It makes repair skill a status symbol.
It attempts to, and the mechanism of action here is faster mismatch detection. Because everyone on the platform has gone through the same training, there's a shared language.
So you can say, I'm feeling a boundary violation right now, and the other person actually knows what that means.
Right. You don't have to explain the dictionary definitions on the first date. You start at step 10 instead of step 1.
You figure out much faster if you aren't compatible.
You don't waste 6 months guessing.
Now, we have to be critical here. The expert in our source material points out some limitations.
Absolutely. First, we have to avoid gender essentialism. We've been talking about women wanting this and men providing that.
These are broad sociological risk landscapes, not biological facts.
Exactly. We're talking about macro trends, not individuals.
And then there's the selection effect with a platform like TBS.
Right. Who signs up for a platform that makes you take a course on feelings? Probably people who are already conscientious.
So it's hard to say if the platform makes people better or just finds the better people and puts them in one room.
It's a walled garden for the emotionally literate.
Which is valuable but doesn't solve the problem for everyone else. And finally, there's stigma.
Right. Even with all this education, the source acknowledges that non-traditional relationships, especially E&M, still carry a heavy social cost.
You might have boundary literacy, but try explaining your polycule to HR at your corporate job.
Or to your grandmother at Thanksgiving. The institutional world hasn't fully caught up to the private world.
So let's bring this all together. We started with the death of institutional intimacy, that move from duty to choice.
Driven by the pill, divorce laws, and secularization, which created a world where relationships are contracts of meaning.
But that freedom created a mismatch. The old provider scripts don't work anymore.
The currency has changed, which is driving a demand for emotional competence skills like boundary literacy and repair.
And we're seeing that manifest in things like the rise of E&M as a structure for explicit consent, not just play.
And finally, we're seeing that we can't just hope people develop these skills. We might need scaffolded intimacy platforms that actually teach us how to negotiate these new contracts.
It really challenges that romantic myth that love should just be natural or easy.
But the reality is, love might be a feeling, but relationships are a skill set. And in a world of negotiated intimacy, that skill set is more complex than ever. You can't just wing it anymore.
So here's the thought we want to leave you with today. We've talked about how modern relationships are essentially contracts of meaning. It's a powerful idea. But if every relationship is now a contract that has to be continually negotiated, do you actually have the negotiation skills to sign it?
And if the answer is no, are you willing to undergo the training required to get them?
That's it for this deep dive. Thanks for listening.
Take care.